Hello students, this is a video guide for argument. It's our next type of essay. I don't want you to think that you're leaving rhetorical analysis behind, because you, as good writers, should use rhetorical devices in your own writing. And so that's why we look at, review and discuss different forms of writing so that you can take on some of those strategies that professional writers use and implement them. And so just keep that in mind as you're writing. How are you going to, because now we're working on argument, so how are you going to gain your reader's trust? How are you going to appeal to them emotionally and logically? So those are the elements that you will have to learn to develop in your own writing. And plus just the structures. If you create parallel sentence structures, your writing is stronger. If you use intentional repetition, you have more fluid, developed writing skills. And so please don't close the door on rhetorical analysis. You, as always, need some documents. And in your content folders, we are down here, argument. You need the art of argument. These are notes. Cicero's shaping. Cicero is the classical argument structure. You'll hear that over and over again in other writing courses. This is the structure most people fall to. And so easy and logical. Here, argument structures, there's two other formats, and I'll show you those as well. This was just when eCampus was down, so we don't need that any longer. And then you'll have a discussion board over two pieces. One is called On Compassion by Barbara Asher, and the other one is called Serving in Florida by Enrin Reich. And On Compassion is a PDF. It's one page, and she describes her encounters with some homeless people in her city, and she develops an argument on how compassion is developed. It's short and sweet. The other piece, Serving in Florida, is a little bit longer. Okay. Barbara Ehrenreich wrote Nickel and Dimed. It's a compilation of her experience working as a minimum wage worker. And so she really develops this argument about how it's almost impossible to survive on minimum wage, especially with one job. Most minimum wage workers need two just to survive, and they're one paycheck away from being homeless. And so she left her nice, comfy apartment, and she did have some startup cash, which that kind of brings her credibility into question, because she really was able to have this safety net, and a lot of people don't. And so just keep that in mind as you read it. Okay, she's a good writer. Now, let's look at the argument notes. That's what's key today. The art of argument. This is Cicero's 6-part oration. This is just broken down, it's very simplified. It's 6 parts, not 6 paragraphs. In fact, you've been doing this, you just didn't know it. In our rhetorical analysis, the first 3 parts almost can be your introductory paragraph. Unless you're writing a really, really long essay, where you would have a long paragraph hooking us and a long paragraph giving background information, and then the claim. Most often in these shorter essays, all 3 parts are in your intro. Your confirmation is where you develop your opinion, and so you have your points, your reasons, along with support. Evidence is key. Both of those elements are key. You don't just start with evidence, you start with a reason for your opinion or your claim, and then you prove it. The refutation, these are not always in essays. It's where you consider the opposing arguments, and you either agree with them, you concede and say they're right a little bit about this point, or you refute them and you argue how they are incorrect and prove how they are incorrect. And then the conclusion. So those are Cicero's 6 parts. This is the same thing. It's just a more modern version with modern language. And then this tells you how to write a hook, which is so important. You want your reader to be interested in your argument before you begin. And so some of these are tried and true. They're kind of been around for a long time. Have you noticed there's no rhetorical questions? That's been overused. So try to avoid that. You have a startling statement, and then anecdotes or scenarios. Even in like the TED Talks, a lot of people used the anecdotes where they tell a personal story or describe a scene from their observations in life. And so that's a beautiful way to start an essay. Humorous, musing. Okay. Analogies are comparing two things. You can take something that's complex and unfamiliar to your audience and compare it with something that is less complex and more familiar. I've said in another talk how politicians or business people will compare anything, the business plan, to a sports game. Okay, and here is the definition. I love using definitions as hooks because you define your topic, and here are different ways to define it. See, it does have an analogy. You create your own unique analogy or simile or metaphor. The difference between analogy and a simile metaphor is analogy is really basic and plain. Similes and metaphors are it's a figurative language, and so it's a little more flowery, for lack of a better word. Okay, so when you write your arguments, your practice arguments, and your discussion boards and journals, practice this. This is where we practice. Okay, and then here's the different types of support, which is key to arguing well. You can't just say you're right, you have to prove it. Okay, and so you can use personal experience, and so for a lot of these essays or responses, you can say I or we and use a personal experience. Just please don't say you. Examples or illustrations, okay. Allusions, just like the speeches we've read and the TED Talks we've viewed. Allusions are logical support where you allude to a piece of literature or history or Greek mythology. Okay, and then facts, details, expert opinions. A lot of these require research, and so for like the discussion posts and journals, I don't expect you to do any research, so you're going to use your own personal experience to support your argument or your observations about the world around you, or maybe current events. Those are nice ways to support arguments. Okay, here's Cicero. This is the same thing with the 6 parts. It's just here I've added this. This is like years and years and years of writing training from various writing teachers and professors out there. And so this is how you organize. You have your opinion in your body paragraph and then your evidence. And you start with the transition. For example, when I was 6 years old, okay, and then you have to argue. This is the argument. What does this mean? Connect it to your claim. And why does it matter? Argue. This means you argue. Okay, now here are some sentence starters. It says this shows that. You can think that in your head and then write the answer. Just don't write this shows that, this shows that, this shows that every time you explain what it means. It would be a little monotonous. And when you're trying to explain why it matters, you can say this is significant because, this is important because, you think that part in your head and then you write the response. Okay? And so for a lot of your essays, you'll need 2 points of confirmation where you're arguing. You may need 3. It just depends. There's not a straitjacket rule on how to format a paragraph. Some essays you're going to need to refute the opposing side. It makes for a more solid argument when you acknowledge the other side. That gains you credibility. It shows that you've done your research. You know there are other opinions out there. And so it's important to do that. And then your conclusion. Okay, that's Cicero. He's your friend. I would use him a lot. I included this just in case. I don't know if we will use these different structures this semester, but I wanted you to see them. This is the classical argument, and this is a Rogerian argument, and down here is the Tolman model. And so they all have the same elements, it's just organized differently. Okay, and then that's it on argument. Your assignments are for the discussion board are to read these two pieces. And then if you go to the discussion board, you will see you have two prompts. Please just select one, and you will need an intro and one body paragraph. Okay, we're practicing, and then your conclusion. Okay, and so your response must be 500 words plus. Please use formal language. You can say I because you may use personal examples to support your opinion, but again, do not say you. Even I wouldn't use I very often. If you're trying to connect to your reader, you can say we or something like that, okay? And so here's your first option. Using Ehrenreich as a model, describe a negative work experience you may have had. Narrate and comment, but use solid specific examples and provide some dialogue. This is key. You're not just telling a story. You need to argue. Okay, what is your point you're trying to make? And so maybe your purpose is how critical bosses create bad employees. That's your purpose. And then you prove it from your own personal example. Okay. And then option 2 is Asher, you have to answer this question or know this answer to this question. How does she believe people develop compassion? Does she think it's something we're born with, or does she think that it's something that we that develops over time, and how does it develop? So you need to know the answer to that, and then you argue whether or not she's right, and you prove your opinion. Okay, and then that's it.